We're now to Donington Park Live with our commentators Derek Bell and Stephen Slater.
Hello there, Stephen Slater at Donington Park. A bright and hot sunny day. Temperatures are 30 degrees Celsius outside the cars and up to 100 degrees Fahrenheit inside the cars. The car's currently on the starting grid with pieces of film over the windscreens now just being removed as the drivers climb aboard. And Bernd Schneider in pole position in the silver Mercedes-Benz. Beside him, the bright yellow car of the Danish driver Kurt Team. Then it's Scotland's Dario Franchitti, almost out of our sight on the left side of the track on row 2 of the grid. The Scott was all set to get pole position yesterday, but then he made a slight mistake at the S's on his one hot qualifying lap. As we now look at the drivers on row 1 of the grid, it's Bernd Schneider and Kurt Team, the German and the Dane, the silver car and the yellow one. The klaxon blows on the grid now to give us 3 minutes to the race start, 1 minute to the race start, as Dario Franchitti and Jörg van Ommen appear on row 2. Franchitti in the second of the silver cars, distinctive with its yellow mirrors and our onboard camera, and the black car of Jörg van Ommen, the German driver who would have been partnered in the team by Jan Magnussen, but he's on the sidelines. Row 3 of the grid. 5th and 6th places, Giancarlo Fisichella, the best of the Alfa Romeo drivers, the 22-year-old Roman, and Klaus Ludwig in the Vauxhall Calibra. Then it's Nicola Larini, the former Formula 1 driver in his white Alfa Romeo, and Yannick Dalmas, multiple Le Mans winner in his Opel Calibra. Looking back at him from the bonnet camera of the Opel and Vauxhall Calibra, the Joest team car, four-wheel drive, 450 brake horsepower V6 machine, and he is lined up 8th on the grid. Now the top 15 places were in a one-off shootout yesterday, and Uwe Alsen, the best of the semi-works cars in the AMG Mercedes-Benz, took the 9th place ahead of the only lady in the championship, the Berliner Ellen Law. So now the engine revs are starting to rise, the cars set off on their warm-up lap, and there's Michael Bartels and Stefano Modena, the two Alfa Romeos. Bartels perhaps the man to watch. He's on a real high because his girlfriend Steffi Graf won at Wimbledon yesterday. Then it's Sandy Grau in the second of the yellow Mercedes. Keke Rosberg, the 1982 Formula 1 Grand Prix world champion in his Vauxhall Calibra on row 7 of the grid, 14th fastest out of 15 in the shootout. Then it was Bernd Mailander, the German youngster in his Mercedes-Benz, bumping down Manuel Reuter to the outside of the 8th row of the starting grid. Mailander and Reuter the man who had a fearsome fire as he crossed the line at the end of his qualifying lap, but it still lines up ahead of Christian Danner, the former Zack Speed Formula 1 driver in his Alfa Romeo, and the former Ferrari veteran Michele Alboreto. They're both ahead of a troubled JJ Leto, who suffered a whole host of electronics problems on his Calibra during qualifying, and Stig Amthor in his white Alfa Romeo. Lining up at the back of the field come Gerd Ruch, the perennial and very spectacular privateer in his blue Mercedes, and Gianno Giudici, another of the very enthusiastic privateers in the International Touring Car Championship. And then Louis Kragers, used to race under the pseudonym of John Winter, a first-class World Sports Car champion, now in a World Sports Car Championship driver, now in a Mercedes Evo car. So now there we see the leading cars heading round Starkey's Corner for the first time. The left-hander halfway round the Donington Park lap, but alongside of me, Derek Bell. He's used to these rolling type starts from World Sports Car Championship races. Derek, what are you doing on that warm-up lap?
Well, you're really just trying to warm up your tyres, and obviously warm up at the same time the brakes, because they're going to have to work pretty heavily when you get to the first corner. So quite obviously they're just getting everything set up, and then we'll see what happens when the flag drops. The most important thing is the guy on the front row, the actual pole sitter. He's going to have to be... He's got the advantage because he can actually go when he decides to go, and the others are not meant to leave until he leaves. But we'll see what happens. I'm sure they're very strict on these starts, and they won't want anybody jumping the start at all.
Certainly then the pressure is on for the men at the front to lead a tight formation. It's quite a difficult run up to the start line here, of course. You've got two hairpin bends on the lead-in. What's the sort of strategy you use for that? Well,
of course, I feel sorry for the guys at the back, because they might not even be round the last turn as they drop the flag, although I'm sure the organisers will want them all to be set up in a straight line when they start, which means, of course, the gentlemen at the front might have a problem, obviously slipping their clutch, waiting for everything to happen, meanwhile overheating it, and the other gentlemen at the back are just coming around the turn, so it's quite difficult. And obviously you can see them going very slowly indeed, and some of these four-wheel drive cars, it's quite difficult with clutch problems trying to keep everything together. So, you know, I don't think it's easy for them at all, and it's going to be very hot in the cockpit. I think basically the problem that we're going to see in this race could be the tyre problems. I know the four-wheel drive cars have probably got a slight advantage because they're not going to be burning just the rears off, they're going to be burning both ends to balance it.
And certainly there, obviously, as well, we saw the weight penalties up on the screen. Now, the cars here penalised if they've won a recent race. They have to carry extra ballast, and the cars carrying the most weight at the moment are Nicola Larini's Alfa Romeo. He's carrying 27 kilos. That's like a half-hundredweight bag of coal in the car in lead ballast because of winning the Helsinki races. And, of course, Bernd Schneider, the man on pole position, actually set that pole position time with a 12-kilo ballast weight in his car. So that is perhaps going to add again to the problems on a very hot track of tyre wear.
Absolutely, yes. But it's interesting to note that we have got two-wheel drive cars at the front. And you will also note that Schneider holds the lap record from last year. So Bernd Schneider is obviously very capable of driving very fast around here, and I'm sure he's going to want to lead from the very start and try and make a break. Because if you can make a break on one of these and everybody's sorted out behind, you're well away, and then you can then conserve your tyres.
Well, we'll see in a moment, because the car's now coming to the start line. Watch the lights on the right of our screen. The clerk of the course is happy. They'll go to red as they pass under the bridge. They should go now. If not, it's going to be another lap. Yes, it is. It goes to green. And it's Bernd Schneider out in front. The yellow car still of Kurt Team on the outside as they barrel into Redgate Corner. Then it's Dario Franchitti, fine third place. Jörg van Ommen. Then the best of the Alfa Romeos, Giancarlo Fisichella. Then the Opel Calibra.
Somebody at the back had a right old moment. There's a fair bit of sliding going on at the back of the field and almost doing a 360, but I think the last person, whoever it was, salvaged it. I only just caught a glimpse of a black car spinning there.
And that, of course, would be Gianno Guidici, the Italian Alfa Romeo privateer, as the pack head through the left-hander at Starkey's. Sixth gear, 120 miles an hour, now hard onto the brakes, down to third, through McLean's Corner. The Calibras in hot pursuit of Fisichella's Alfa Romeo, but it's Mercedes 1, 2, 3, 4 at the head of the field. Bernd Schneider, Kurt Team, Dario Franchitti and Jörg van Ommen. Then it's the Alfa Romeo of the youngster, the 22-year-old driver, Giancarlo Fisichella. Perhaps a man to watch, but out in front at the moment, Bernd Schneider still in the silver AMG Mercedes-Benz, heading Kurt Team, then Franchitti, then Van Ommen. Fisichella with the car moving up there. It's one of the Alfa Romeos, and it's Nicola Larini, 27 kilos of ballast and all, right on the tail of the Calibras now. But through the Melbourne hairpin, it's still Schneider out in front. But of course, we saw Schneider at Mugello, the opening races of the series, lead like this from the front in the second round of the championship. And Dario Franchitti sat back there in third and second places, saved his tyres. And then the Scotsman, of course, won the first ever Brit to win one of these international touring car events.
Well, of course, that's the way to do it. You know, you don't win races with brawn alone. You have to use your brains a lot. And Franchitti's obviously a very bright lad. It's his first season in this sort of racing, and he's really gone up a mark and a big time. And he uses his brains. And I was chatting to him just before. He seems very confident about the whole thing. And I mean, be intrigued to see how he gets on.
Well, we're riding with number 19. That's the bright orange Alfa Romeo of Michael Bartels. As we said earlier, Steffi Graf, his girlfriend, was a winner yesterday. Let's see how he does. Looks in his rear-view mirror in the Alfa Romeo. We look to see the car behind him, and that is the Mercedes-Benz of Uwe Altzen, the semi-works car number 22. But out in front, it's still number 14, Bernd Schneider. But into the pits, one of the Mercedes-Benz. That looks like Ellen Law.
That didn't last very long. One lap and she was in.
So desperate work going on in the pits garage. Now, of course, we have a short gap between these two races, and I should think if they can't get the car back out very quickly, they'll abort this race and continue working on the car to have it fit for the next one.
Absolutely, that's what they should do. Take their time and do a good job so they are ready for the next race. I'm surprised nobody mentioned the fact that they might have problems with brakes. Donington's historically very, very heavy on brakes. You can see them braking down inside, and you just see Bartels overtake there. And that's probably what he was hoping he was going to get away from, so that he could make a break there.
Well, certainly Michael Bartels. And heading into the pit lane comes Nicola Larini, so we'll watch out for the action in the pit lane. As also going through there on a charge comes Sandy Grau, the young Mercedes driver, teammate to Kurt Team, the second place man, as Nicola Larini in car number 8 heads into the pit lane. The sole surviving Martini Alfa Romeo, his teammate Nannini crashed his car so comprehensively in Friday's qualifying that he is unable to race. Michael Bartels taking advantage of Larini's problems, and now he's starting to close in on the red Alfa Romeo. We watch Bartels on a replay now going down into the Melbourne hairpin. Nicola Larini, as you said there, mentioning brakes, it looks as if he was on the brakes very early.
It did indeed, but of course he did come in the pits, so I suppose that was why he was actually easing himself across the road to allow Bartels through, which was very good of him.
So the field head up to Coppice Corner, and it's still out in front. Number 14, Bernd Schneider, then number 6, Kurt Thiem, number 15, Dario Franchitti, then number 3, Jörg van Ommen in the black Mercedes-Benz, then the best of the Alfa Romeos, car number 26, Giancarlo Fisichella, and then in hot pursuit, it's the Yannick Dalmas, car number 10, Opel Calibra. In fact, in front of him is the Klaus Ludwig number 1 car. The work goes on in the pit lane on Nicola Larini's Alfa Romeo.
There's actually, you're actually seeing Schneider actually make quite a gap in the front. He's actually pulling away a little bit, which I'm sure he's very pleased to do.
And yes, the gap now by touring car standards getting quite large, 0.97 of a second, just on 1 second. And then right behind him, it's still Dario Franchitti in that 3rd place as we watch Gianni Giudici and the red Alfa Romeo of Michele Alboreto, and Giudici doing a big fist-waving exercise there. And it was perhaps Alboreto that had that problem at the back of the pack, and he's fighting his way back through.
Yes, he's doing a very good job, and that's probably why Alboreto had a bit of a go at him there. It might have been, he might have been involved in the very first place.
Well, perhaps those of you who saw the race from the Norris Ring, the German Touring Car Championship, this of course the International Series, did see Giudici not be very popular with many of the drivers, being a very difficult man to lap. And it certainly appears Giudici is facing controversy yet again. We take a look at the bright yellow Pro-Marked car of Kurt Thiem, the Danish driver, front runner in German touring cars now for a number of years. Started actually driving for Rover in the German Touring Car Championship back in 1986, but he's been exclusively a Mercedes driver since '89. 15 wins in the German Series, still looking for his first win in the International Touring Car Championship. Then we've got the rest of the pack, the Vauxhall Calibras, the black car of JJ Leto, struggling now to hold on ahead of Stig Amthor's Alfa Romeo, and he's down in 16th place, so it looks like JJ Leto's unhappy weekend is still going on.
Yes, he had a lot of problems, he said, with his gearbox and things, and they missed a lot of practice, and you just can't afford to get behind at all. Rosberg had similar problems with his clutch and gearbox.
So out of Goddard's comes Kurt Thiem, through and round and into the pit lane for a second time for Nicola Larini. So the Alfa Romeo Martini team's trouble weekend continues. Larini back into the pits. They tried something, it obviously didn't work.
These cars are very high-tech, as you can imagine. A lot of money spent on the development. And talking to Alboreto just before the race, they've had no end of electronic problems during practice, but he said we have to race on it so that eventually it works, and then we will be very, very quick. So he's very relaxed about the whole thing.
Of course, these cars have the Alfa Romeos are electronically controlled, traction control, 4-wheel drive, and active suspension as well. Really the technology that Formula One banned.
Absolutely, yes, it's really rather strange. It's like, well, the cast-offs from Formula One have come into this series, but with this sort of car, it does obviously escalate the cost of motorsport, which is rather a pity, but nonetheless, it makes it very exciting. Now
we're riding on our on-car camera, and that is with Michael Bartels, the bright orange Alfa Romeo, and Bartels now closing in on Stefano Modena in the red Alfa and Yannick Dalmas in the Vauxhall Calibra. The two Calibras currently running 6th and 7th places. Klaus Ludwig in the black and blue, black, blue and yellow Rosberg racing car. Yannick Dalmas 7th place in the white and yellow Calibra. Then Modena 8th, and then Michael Bartels, we're riding with him there in 9th.
Very intense look on his face, you'll notice there. He was really studying it as he turned into the turn. If only you could actually see the pupils of his eyes, they'd be way, way out in front, really taking in everything. Riding with Bartels now into the Goddard left-handed hairpin. There you see the Calibra of Dalmas, Modena's red Alfa Romeo, then the orange Calibra. There you see the leaders going through at the bottom of our frame. Starting lap, Bernd Schneider now with a 1.7 second lead, then Dario Franchitti. Meanwhile, the Alfa Romeo team, they've removed the front bodywork from the Alfa. That car, Larini's car, pushed into retirement. But it's Schneider, 1.7 seconds out in front, then Franchitti, then Van Ommen in fourth, Thiem, I beg your pardon, second, Franchitti third, Van Ommen fourth, Giancarlo Fisichella in the first of the Alfa Romeos in fifth, then Klaus Ludwig sixth, then this battle for 7th place between Yannick Dalmas, Stefano Modena and Michael Bartels. We're now riding in the number 10 Calibra. Yannick Dalmas, French driver, former winner of the Le Mans 24 Hours race, like my very famous
co-commentator Derek Bell today as Michele Alboreto drives straight into the pit garage. That race is obviously over.
Yes, well, obviously his development is still developing, and he's got a long way to go. But he was very relaxed about it before the start and just didn't know how long it would last. Just look at those eyes in that shot there. Amazing, really piercing out through the front of the screen. And notice, obviously, his steering wheel, rather like in an aircraft, he's got the top bit cut off.
Yes, I spoke to Yannick Dalmas about that yesterday, and he was actually saying that's actually for visibility. He sits so low in that car to get the centre of gravity as low as possible. The cutouts there so he can actually see through the steering wheel. But it's Bernd Schneider still out in front. The Mercedes at the moment leading a white wash or a silver and yellow wash with Bernd Schneider and Kurt Thiem. Then Dario Franchitti still in a fine third place. Jörg van Ommen in the black Mercedes-Benz in fourth. Then Giancarlo Fisichella as we look back from Yannick Dalmas in seventh position. Stefano Modena in his Alfa Romeo right behind. And then it's Michael Bartels in the orange Alfa. You can see him closing in. Behind them, it's Sandy Grau charging through the field. Well, the work on Ellen Law's car in the pits has now been completed. She's going to rejoin 5 laps down.
Yeah, she's just going to be able to cruise around. I'm sure, being experienced and professional that she is, she won't be getting in anybody's way too much.
So we see Bernd Schneider, the silver number 14 car. Distinctive yellow mirrors, that's how you tell his car apart from Dario Franchitti's. If you look back, you'll see Kurt Thiem's yellow Mercedes, now 1.8 seconds behind. Then 3.7 seconds behind the leader comes Dario Franchitti. You'll see him now coming onto the straight. There he is, and his door mirrors bright red. That's how we tell them apart. Then it's Jörg van Ommen in fourth position, but closing in fast in fifth. Giancarlo Fisichella has got the gap down to less than 0.8 of a second on van Ommen. And it looks as if the Italian is on a charge. And what a debut in the International Touring Car Series for this young Italian. Won the Italian Formula 3 Championship last year. There we see the master, perhaps, of touring car racing with these cars, Klaus Ludwig. And we're now riding with Bernd Merlander. Ahead of him, a very big name, Keke Rosberg.
Yes, Keke's out there. He missed the whole of Friday's practice, so he's not very happy, but inevitably very relaxed, because after Formula 1, this must be very relaxed. We're just going out there to do the best they could with what they had, because if you miss a day, you're always a day behind, and we reckon that if there was a race tomorrow, he'd probably be running very quickly.
So Bernd Merlander in 13th place, closing in on the 12th place Calibra of Keke Rosberg, who sadly is starting to drop back. In fact, he's actually gained a couple of places because of retirement, but he's starting to lose ground again. You can see Merlander in the blue and green Person Motorsport car, closing in on the tail again. Behind them, of course, Manuel Reuter was really a favourite to repeat his Donington victory of last year, but his weekend turned to disaster yesterday when his car crossed the start line at the end of its qualifying lap with the whole underside on fire. You say losing time like that and causing engineering disasters like that really just put you right out of it.
Absolutely, and I spoke to Reinhold Jost before the race, and actually he was quite confident about things, but of course he has got one car up there, and Reuter's not having a good time at all, which is a great pity because he's a magnificent driver. Incidentally, Franchitti's going to have to move on a bit here because he's got Van Ommen right behind him, and they're chasing each other, and so Franchitti's going to have to move on a bit, otherwise he's going to get involved in the dice, and he's going to end up losing a bit of position because he's going to have to block them out.
Well, we're now going to the pits with the German commentator, I think, to talk to Nicola Larini. Sabine Kerner is just lining up something down there as we return to the action down at the Melbourne hairpin, and it's still that battle on for 7th place. Yannick Dalmas, Stefano Modena and Michael Bartels, with now closing in young Sandy Grau in the yellow Mercedes-Benz, and closing in behind him Uwe Altzen, the man who made his name racing Porsche sports cars in the Porsche Super Cup and the Porsche Carrera Cup, now moving up into his second season with a Mercedes-Benz in the International Touring Car Series. And this battle really is going very hard indeed. 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, as we watch a little bit of two-wheeling flying over the curbs. That's the white Alfa Romeo of Stig Amthor.
Yes, he's having a bit of a go there. Of course, some of the suspension doesn't like this too much. It doesn't know quite how to react to hitting curbs, and gets lots of feedback when you're getting this traction control stuff, and can really upset your acceleration thereafter.
Well, riding down the Craner curves in pursuit of Keke Rosberg with Bernd Merlander, second of the Person Motorsport Mercedes-Benz, Uwe Alsen's teammate. And Merlander really is very much a privateer. This is one of last year's Mercedes cars competing against the 95 Vauxhall Calibra, and it really is a bit sad, I think, for the Vauxhall team. The Rosberg team to have all these problems at the Donington Park race.
Yes, I mean, you've got to put it down to the fact they're always developing, and it's like swings and roundabouts. Some races you're going to get Rosberg's and the Opel cars doing incredibly well because they've solved their problems, and obviously they're trying new developments, and they've got all this Formula One high-tech stuff, which does cause a lot of problems in setting it up. Once it works, we'll be well away, but obviously Rosberg is not having a good time under braking either.
Well, certainly using every inch of the tarmac, plus a little bit more at the S's. We saw briefly a look at Bernd Mailander in the car there as well, and those of you may recognise the rather distinctive crash helmet colours that Bernd Mailander carries. His great motor racing hero was none other than one Nigel Mansell, and his helmet reflects that. But look at this now, the two Calibras, the Mercedes, really doing battle. Bernd Mailander sandwiched between Keke Rosberg and a charging Manuel Reuter. Reuter had all those problems in qualifying yesterday. He had to start 17th on the starting grid today. There he is, the third of the cars in this train. Christian Danner also had problems yesterday. He started way down at the tail of the top 20. Danner now up into 15th place. Reuter up into 14th. Mailander in car 23, still on the tail of Keke Rosberg in the number 2 Calibra as they head down the Craner curves, down to the old hairpin. What sort of speeds are you pulling through here?
Well, very good question, actually. They're really tramping on down there in 5th and 6th gear down through the Kramer curves, and I guess they're probably pulling around about 140 miles an hour down there, not much more, but it certainly is very fast when you're in the car because those sweeps and turns are very tight from within the cockpit. The view we're getting doesn't really give justice to how difficult it is to get down through the Kramer curves. It's very difficult indeed. It's like just going straight down a hill. Very, very difficult. To the very tight right hand at the bottom.
Now, of course, onto the long Starkey straight under the bridge and then down hard onto the brakes in the S's. This really must be for the last of the late breakers.
Well, it really is, and of course if you overshoot, well, you're in a lot of trouble because the others are going to go by and you're going to have to take evasive action and lose 3 or 4 spots. So, you know, it's sort of very fine judgment at this stage as to how you brake.
And down to the Melbourne hairpin comes this battle, and it's still Keke Rosberg holding on in 12th position. Bernd Mailander in 13th, Manuel Reuter in 14th, and Christian Danner in 15th place. But this is really turning into the dice of the race. But not to forget, still out in front now with nearly a 4-second lead is this man, Bernd Schneider. 3.91 seconds ahead of the Dane Kurt Team in the second of the Mercedes-Benz, and it's still 1, 2, 3, 4 for the Mercedes. Dario Franchitti, the young Scot from Lothian, still in 3rd position, 5.6 seconds behind his teammate and the race leader. There are the top 3 and the top 4 and the top 5 as Jörg van Ommen and Giancarlo Fisichella come into view. Then it's the best of the Calibras. Klaus Ludwig in 6th position, 11 seconds now behind the race leader, with Yannick Dalmas in 7th, Stefano Modena in 8th, Michael Bartels in 9th, and Sandy Grau in 10th. Giancarlo Fisichella exits the S's, closing in now, and the battle for 2nd, 3rd and 4th places is starting to close up. Bernd Schneider is pulling away at the head of the field, but nobody can actually make a break from the pack in 2nd.
No, it must be very satisfying for Schneider to find himself so far ahead. As I mentioned earlier, he holds the lap record from last year, and in fact he's still 3/10 off taking it, so he's obviously not stretching himself too much, but he's really gradually pulling away, and that's all he's worried about. He's not worried about in lap records at all. But I'm amazed that we're getting 3rd place, 4th and 5th place man having such a good close battle and not actually making up much time on team. I thought they might be making more time up on him.
Now, of course, could this be a question of strategy? We're not yet at half distance in this race. 11 laps completed out of 25. Could it be that Bernd Schneider's in danger of actually running too hard and overheating his tyres?
I would say not at all. To me, Schneider is a very cool operator. He's driven these cars for some time now, and it's much nicer to be up front, just controlling the situation. He can back off, brake a little bit earlier if he has to, but just drive that bit harder through the corners, and then if he wants to, back off a bit later and then just take it easier through the corners. So he can, you know, he can swap around. But when you've got somebody right behind you, 3 or 4 tenths, there's no way that you can have that sort of intelligent driving. You've got to go for it all the way. And I would say the gentleman behind, you've got Team, Franchitti and Van Omen, they're actually having a much harder fought battle. You actually saw Team get out a bit loose as he turned into the corner there. So his rear tyres are probably going a little bit. He's fighting to keep himself ahead. And of course you can see Franchitti is actually closing right up on him here. So it's becoming much more interesting. Look at that, Franchitti's right behind him. Very smooth bit of driving by Franchitti through there. You notice there's very little opposite lock at all. Nice, smooth, sequential shifts that he's making there. And he's just playing it very hard. He's pushing him right hard. He's making him brake very, very deep into corners. And that's going to really upset Team. And I think you'll find Franchitti probably making a move on it before this race is over.
Well, Dario Franchitti in his first season with these Class 1 touring cars, very different to the cars we see in the British Touring Car Championship, nearly half as much horsepower again, very advanced suspension, electronic traction control, and again we're seeing that sequential gear change. Explain how that one works to us, Derek.
Yeah, well, you can see we had the same in the works Porsches for some time, and literally you just keep moving it up a notch up to the next gear, and you just push it, but with your foot flat on the floor, so you don't actually lose any time. You just keep your foot flat down and knock it up a gear. No clutch movement at all. Here he is. He's just going up a gear. I'm sorry, down a gear. Now he's going down again, and he'll drive it through, pick up the revs, and just whack it with his hand. It's very much more simple than having to work it around across the box to find the correct gear.
And of course, little yellow light flashing on the dashboard there, that just warns him that the car's about to come onto the rev limiter.
Absolutely, and he probably got another light that tells him he's there. Then there's a lot of noise going on afterwards. So he'll probably run it right to a limit, because remember, they have got another race to go. They probably aren't pushing them totally to the limit at this point.
So Dario Franchitti, the 22-year-old from West Lothian, came through from Formula Vauxhall and Formula 3 in the British Championships, and then into the German touring cars and the international touring cars. And we see now JJ Leto, fastest through our time trap there, 213 kilometers an hour, just over 125 miles an hour. JJ Leto perhaps getting some of his problems behind him, but he's still down in 16th place. And Dario Franchitti is most definitely closing in on the tail of Kurt Team. The battle on now for second place as they head across the line, but it's still Bernd Schneider now extending. In fact, the lead coming back very slightly now, 5.5 seconds. So Schneider's either cruising, or the battle between Team Franchitti and Van Ommen in fourth position is bringing them closer and closer to the race leader.
His lap times are down a bit at this point. Oh,
and a car has gone off in a very big way. It's the number 10 car. It's Yannick Dalmas inverted at Redgate Corner. This is dramatic. The Frenchman is okay. There he is, climbing on his hands and knees out of one side of the cars. The marshals are searching for him on the other side. Yannick Dalmas is okay. His car in the gravel trap. There we see it, right in front of our commentary position. We saw a flash of yellow past our window. Let's take another look at that. He loses it at the entrance to Redgate Corner. Brake failure, perhaps?
No, I think he locked some brakes up. He pulled a bit to the left, and once he was on that white line, it whipped him onto the grass, and of course, then it was all over.
Hits the tyre walls. The tyre walls do a superb job of reducing the impact, but disaster for Yannick Dalmas. Certainly out of his 7th place, and almost certainly out of the remainder of the weekend's activities. But now we have to wait and see whether this is judged to be in a safe enough position to avoid bringing out the pace car. We'll take a look. We haven't seen the pace car scrambled yet.
Well, basically, they should move that car out of the way, because if he can go off, so can somebody else, and they're going to go straight into a parked car with half a tank of fuel, which is a very dangerous situation.
And the race leader's now heading down. As out of the pit lane comes the pace car. So, slowing down behind the pace car comes the race leader, Bernd Schneider. There he is, closing in. Then it's going to be Kurt Team. Dario Franchitti had made his move for second place, just out of our view. We saw him briefly. He has passed Kurt Team. So the young Scot up to second on the tail of his teammate, Bernd Schneider. Bernd Schneider, then Dario Franchitti, then the yellow car of Kurt Team, 14, 15 and 6. Then car number 3, Jörg van Ommen, the black Mercedes-Benz ahead of the number 26 Alfa Romeo, Giancarlo Fisichella. Then the best of the Calibras, Klaus Ludwig in the Rosberg racing car behind the Alfa Romeo. He'll come into our view now, followed through by Stefano Modena, Michael Bartels and Sandy Grau, with Uwe Altzen rounding out the top 10. The pace of the race is slowing. British Motor Racing Marshal Muscle Power is endeavouring to clear the gravel trap at the Redgate Corner. It's going to take a lap, perhaps two. Now, what happens when you get into a caution car situation like this?
Well, I was going to say, Franchitti just will not be able to believe his luck that he actually happened to take Team just in time, because obviously he was working Team over very heavily there, and he was wearing out his tyres and getting his brakes a bit too hot. He got by just before the yellow caution. Now, I was concerned that if he hadn't got by, with the caution, the tyres are going to cool down, and the brake's going to cool down. So when we have and the driver will cool down. So when we have the restart, of course, team would be back on form again, and poor old Franchitti would have to got by. But he made that move on just the right lap, and he didn't realise how important it was.
Well, looking back to the fourth place car, the black Mercedes-Benz of Jörg van Ommen's driving down the straight at the moment with the door wide open. What's that for?
I would think it's a little bit hot in there. Probably around about 150 degrees, if you can just imagine it. So it's pretty unpleasant. I mean, they're sitting there with their legs alongside the engine, and I don't blame him. It's very, very hot indeed. You can see all the windows are sealed up if you look at them, because obviously, actually I noticed that Bartels' window was open. But the other cars I noticed seem to be very, very sealed. It's all very well. But of course, when you slow down, there is no airflow at all through the car. So your louvers, which are actually picking the air up from the ambient, although it's cool at 150, 140 miles an hour, obviously he's only doing 20, 30 miles an hour, there's no air coming, and suddenly the body is overheating dramatically. Now they're going to be supping on their drink bottles to get some electrolytes and minerals back into their blood stream, so they're all energized up, ready to go for the last run of this half of the race.
So then the leaders follow the pace car round to start another lap in this safety car phase of the race. 14 of the 25 laps completed. Now the 15th lap, and the German commentator is now just lining up to talk to the Opel team personnel, the Team Jurs personnel. They're saying they really don't know exactly what is going on. Walter Tracer, the head of GM's Motorsport, and Reinhold Jurs, the man who really effectively owns that car. He's going to be facing quite a big bill at the end of the day, Derek.
Yes, I suppose so, but I know Reinhold, he's probably worked it out with Opel, and he probably doesn't have to pay too much.
Now,
I've driven him a lot.
Yes, I was going to say, of course, you race with Reinhold. I mean, what sort of competitive spirit does a team manager like that need?
Well, he's amazing. He's always very calm and always very cool, and really doesn't have too much emotion showing, but boy, he really goes through a lot. And, you know, when you've been racing so long, you've got this situation, he's been through it many times before, and I guess it's a lot cheaper than losing a Porsche 962, which from time to time he's lost, so I don't think it's too bad for him. But nonetheless, you know, he had a driver that was right up there in the race, and that's a great pity.
So then we've got the classification after 16 of the 25 laps, and Bernd Schneider still leading Dario Franchitti, Kurt Thiem, and Jörg van Ommen, Giancarlo Fisichella in fifth. Then it's Ludwig Modena, Bartels, Sandy Grau, and Uwe Altzen. Pace car still with the lights going. The car's now weaving down the straight. I guess that's keeping the temperature. And then the car's now heading down the straight, back towards the pit lane. And we're joined Andrew Marriott in the pit lane.
Yes, well, lots of action down here, of course. We've seen the huge accident down there to Yannick Dalmas. Didn't see exactly what happened. We believe that Yannick is okay, climbed out of the car. They got a tractor to pull the car away. Also, we've been watching the activity behind me, where Nicola Laurini's Alfa Romeo is receiving a new engine. Apparently some electronic problem with that car. And let's go back now to you, Stephen, back in the commentary box.
And now back to the race. The car's still progressing through the hairpin behind the safety car, keeping the speed down to around about a 70 miles an hour average speed. It's still pretty quick down there.
Yes, well, obviously they have to, because these engines are going to overheat, and in reality there's nothing actually on the track itself. The incident was off the track, but in a dangerous position, so they haven't got to worry about these wonderful marshals who do a great job, incidentally.
Now, of course, the pace car has its orange light turned off. That is an indication to the drivers.
The indication is that next lap we're going to go green, and then we're all going to be chasing it along for the last 8 or 9 laps of this race. So right now the lads are getting themselves geared up, the doors are getting shut, they're having the last sip on their drink bottles, and they're ready for action. They're going to have to warm the tyres up just a little bit, but there's not too much weaving done at the moment, because I think the pace car has actually picked up a bit of speed, which means they can probably drive through the corners a little quicker. But this would be a great, great relief to all those drivers out there, because their tyres have had a little bit of rest for 2 or 3 laps.
So 9 laps of the race still to go. And out in front, it's still Bernd Schneider. Of course, though, that margin that he'd built up so carefully has now been eroded. It's going to be a fraction of a second as all the field pile across the line, and it's going to be his teammate Dario Franchitti behind him, then Kurt Thiem in the yellow Mercedes, Jörg van Ommen, then Giancarlo Fisichella in the 5th place Alfa Romeo, ahead of Ludwig, Modena, Bartels, Grau and Altzen. And of course now Klaus Ludwig, the sole surviving Calibra, in the top 10. Keke Rosberg is down in 11th place. JJ Leto down in 15th position. So that really is a little bit upsetting for the Calibra team. There we see two of the Calibras, and then the black car of JJ Leto overcoming a very, very troubled weekend of qualifying. His car now starting to get on the pace. The yellow flag still being waved, of course, to say no overtaking. So now the drivers are psyching themselves back up as they head through the S's for the final time. The pace car goes through with its lights now dimmed.
I think Franchitti will find it a little bit more difficult to get by Bernd Schneider, and whether if he got into a battle with him, it would be very approved by the Mercedes team managers. I don't know, because they're basically in the same team. I think it's interesting, obviously, for Ludwig to be up there. I think he could make quite a difference now. He'll be charging a little bit to try and get an improvement on his position and perhaps get by Fisichella at this point.
So now the cars seem to slow even more this time out of Melbourne. Perhaps that's to bunch the rest of the field up.
Well, the pace car went very slowly because he intelligently is trying to slow everybody down. What they don't want is everybody going over the start-finish line at 150 miles an hour and finding somebody overtaking at that point and having to stop it, causing a lot of pile-up. So the slower they can go, the better.
So now the cars build up speed. Bernd Schneider comes across the line. Full chat, full power. The race is on again. 17 of the 25 laps completed. It's going to be an 8-lap dash to the flag now. This really is going to turn into a game of winner takes all.
Yes, oh, here we have Bartels in the pits. Now that's an unusual to come in at that point. You thought he would have picked a sooner point to come in, but something must have gone wrong on the very last lap under the yellow caution or under the pace car. And he's come in to change tyres. Very unusual move that, unless he had a puncture.
So Bartels in immediate trouble. That's robbed him of his 5th position. Michael Bartels, the unlucky German in the Alfa Romeo, led the German touring car race at the Norris Ring, and they seem to have problems now getting the car going, Derek.
Well, it's the left rear wheel they've got a problem with. There's a lot of hand waving going by the crew chief. Oh, now he can go, and we don't know whether he's gone yet.
But Bernd Schneider is most definitely still out in front.
Laying rubber.
Smoking down the straight comes Bernd Schneider with Dario Franchitti still in 2nd place. There goes Michael Bartels out of the pit lane. But it's the silver Mercedes, the Silver Arrows, 1-2 at Donington Park, rolling back the clock 60 years to the last time we saw Mercedes Silver Arrows running 1-2, perhaps. Although perhaps in the World Sports Car Days too, Derek, the Mercedes were out in front.
They ran very well in here indeed, and I was a long way back. I wouldn't really remember. But yes, it was great to see those Silver Arrows here not that long ago. You notice that Schneider actually, his last lap was at 2:31, was on it, obviously under the pace car, and now we're on the way.
Well, certainly, while that goes on, we're joined by Sabine Kerner in the pit lane, talking to Nicola Larini, who's explaining from German to Italian about his retirement in the race. It looks like a mechanical problem. And they're saying that they have a problem, I think, with water loss on the Alfa Romeo. My Italian is not as good as my German, which isn't exactly perfect. So they have an engine problem on the Nicola Larini Alfa Romeo. They're trying to fix it, and it appears to be stemming from a water loss, so perhaps the high temperatures paying the penalty. But don't forget, these teams and these cars are amazing because you can actually change an engine in one of these cars in less than 15 minutes. Mercedes currently hold the record with 10.8 minutes to change an engine from engine running or to engine running to engine stop to engine running again. And all the cars are designed so you can lift the one-piece front off and then wheel the engine out on a special trolley and wheel a new one in. So almost certainly Nicola Larini's team will replace the engine completely with the front suspension too in one move to get him out for the next race.
This is what a great dice we're having going on here. I mean, here we go. Bartels is in again. Obviously, it's a bit more substantial a problem than he had before. But this group here are having a mighty good race. But I noticed Ludwig dropped back there rather than go ahead as I assumed he would. He's actually started to drop back a bit.
And Klaus Ludwig definitely in trouble as we head back to the pit lane to Andrew Marriott.
Michael Bartels has just come back into the pits for the 2nd time. They did a quick tyre change, which I thought initially was a sort of IndyCar tactic to get back on the end of the slow-moving field behind the pace car. But now Bartels has come back in here, and I believe he has some problem with the gear linkage. Back to you, Stephen.
And now out of the Redgate corner comes Klaus Ludwig. Ludwig dropping back from 6th to 7th position in the number 1 Calibra. Now right on his tail is car 22, Uwe Altzen in the bright green Mercedes-Benz, and pulling away ahead of him in 6th position is the Alfa. And look at this collision down at the Melbourne hairpin. Uwe Altzen tries a very late braking manoeuvre. Klaus Ludwig, the most experienced man in Class 1 touring car racing, most definitely defends his position. You can see him waving in the rear view mirror there to Uwe Altzen, who is in his 3rd season of the championship. There we see Uwe Altzen, though, still piling on the pressure to the ailing Klaus Ludwig, and it appears Ludwig certainly has a problem. But a superb battle going on there for 6th, 7th, 8th and 9th places, because Sandy Grau is closing in 2 in the yellow Mercedes. Stefano Modena still in that 6th position. Then it's Ludwig in 7th, Altzen in 8th, Grau in 9th and Reuter in 10th.
Yes, it's absolutely interesting right there, because you've got Modena really heavily being chased, and he seemed to get a break just now. Now he seemed to have locked a break up coming in there. Looks like Ludwig has a little bit of understeer going through that corner, which can't be much of an advantage.
And there was something actually spraying from the back of Ludwig's car just as it went out of our view up to the Goddard's hairpin. But coming down from Goddard's to Redgate, it's still number 14, Bernd Schneider, ahead of number 15, Dario Franchitti, number 6, Kurt Thiem, and number 3, Jörg van Ommen, Fisichella 5th. Then this battle, Modena, Ludwig, Altzen, Grau, Reuter in the Opel Calibra, closing in at the tail of that group too. And back. So now we have the Alfa being chased by the Calibra, being chased by the Mercedes-Benz. And of course the Calibras this weekend wearing the chrome Vauxhall badges in honour of the home mark of General Motors in Europe. So the Vauxhall Calibras, there's the Rosberg racing car, pursued by Uwe Altzen's Mercedes-Benz. Then Sandy Grau in the yellow Mercedes, the teammate of Kurt Thiem. He is in 9th position. Michael Bartel's being asked about his problem in the pit lane now, and rather reluctant to speak. In fact, the team slamming the door in our pit lane. Commentator's face down there. Poor Sabine. As we return. So Michael Bartels is leaving the pit lane now in the Alfa Romeo. And heading down to the S's comes our stupendous battle just outside the top 10. And JJ Leto, Keke Rosberg battling for 13th and 14th places. Then in 15th place is Gerd Ruck, 16th Stig Amthor, 17th Gennady Giudici and Lewis Kragerson. Oh, and a big nudge on the tail as he gets by Klaus Ludwig. It's Uwe Altzen taking Ludwig's hard work for 7th place. Now Ludwig has obviously got some sort of a problem with the Calibra. The question now is he going to be able to hold on the pressure behind him now from Sandy Grau and Manuel Reuter?
It was probably something to do with his gearbox, because he's seemed to be very slow turning into the Melbourne curve every time, and that's exactly where he had the problem last lap. And now, of course, we've got Altzen got by him at that same corner, so maybe it's the slow speed corners he has a problem.
And Altzen lapping over half of them, in fact almost a full second a lap faster than Ludwig. He's dropped his pace to 1 minute 36 seconds on the last lap. That's nearly 3 seconds shy of his best possible lap around the circuit. So most definitely Ludwig struggling with something. And of course the Calibras are among the most sophisticated of all of these cars out there. They actually inherited from the Williams Grand Prix team the comprehensive hydraulic traction control, ABS brakes, automatic gear change and active ride computer-controlled suspension system that was used on the Williams FW14 Grand Prix car, and then of course was outlawed from the Formula One World Championship. And they've been working incredibly hard right through from the end of last winter to try and get that system to work on a much larger, heavier Class 1 touring car.
Yes, obviously it is quite a different thing to make it work on one of these, so it's going to take time to get it actually perfect. Meanwhile, everybody else is trying different methods to stay with them. But it's a very, very expensive process. But of course, this form of racing is wonderful for the fans because they can identify with the cars, and you get close racing, a lot of overtaking. And I think it's very important that we keep this racing very, very strong. They need these technical
Let's
advances.
take a look at the tail of Rosberg's car again. We did see something again like water or liquid dripping from the tail of Rosberg's car as he exited the Melbourne hairpin. It was okay as he came out of Goddard's. Now perhaps it's only happening on right-handers. Let's have a look at it as he heads into Redgate. Well, we don't get a chance to see it because we see Bernd Schneider right on the limit down at the old hairpin. He has already pulled out a further 1.7 seconds over his teammate Dario Franchitti, and perhaps the young Scot is going to be happy to follow in his teammate's slipstream. And Schneider is pushing very hard. You could see the car drifting beautifully there out of McLean's, up onto the curbs, now round into Coppice Corner. And perhaps I'm being proved wrong, because it appears that Dario Franchitti's starting to reel him back in again.
Yes, but of course they are still running a second off what they were running in the first half of this race, which probably means to say that the tyres aren't exactly performing as well as they were. And with Franchitti pushing Schneider, of course it means that Schneider has got to press on a bit, and maybe his tyres, we should be in much better shape. But he should be able to just hold his head down. I mean, there aren't that many laps to go. What, three laps to go?
And Schneider definitely in trouble. Locks a wheel. The car runs out of braking, it appears, on the way to Melbourne. Franchitti now right on the tail of Schneider. And Bernd Schneider doing a superb job to recover that. But that really must have given the German a little bit of a scare. Number 14 car still leads number 15. Let's take another look at that.
See, all his tyres are locked up, and he just couldn't quite make it in there, but he kept braking in a straight line as he possibly could, hit the power, and away he came, and actually lost very little time whatsoever.
Now, these cars, of course, run with very comprehensive ABS, anti-lock braking. How does that help you when you're in a situation like that?
Well, I mean, you know the car's going to stop, and you know it's not really going to lock any brakes up, but it's not going to work a miracle. It's not just going to stop because you've overshot the corner. It's still only a certain amount of physics operating there, and so he has to wait for it all to come together and then get on it.
And Schneider, again, being pushed very hard, and he's definitely having to up his game now. 1:33.71, his best, his last lap, 1.73 seconds ahead of Dario Franchitti, who was just 0.02 of a second slower on the last lap. So Bernd Schneider is still out in front, but Dario Franchitti on home ground is taking the game very much to the German. I'd love to be a fly on the wall in the pit garage after this race.
It'll be very interesting, but all I like to say is that Dario is getting a great lesson from a great touring car driver, and I'm sure that's what he's out there trying to do. I mean, it's his first season in it, so all he's got to do is really learn so that he can really come on strong in the major team next year, because he is, after all, the Mercedes junior team, so it's cool.
Well, of course, Bernd Schneider, only 30 years old, but what a record. He was the Formula 3 champion back in 1987. Then he moved on into Formula 1 with Zakspeed in 88 and 89, and also contested from 86 onwards the German Touring Car Championship, first of all with the Ford Sierra Cosworths, and then moved on to Mercedes and the German touring cars. And we're going back to the pit lane now to Andrew Marriott. Well, we're not back in the pit lane then, so on to the final lap it is with Bernd Schneider. Schneider barreling through Redgate Corner for the final time. It's still 1.7 seconds across the line, so Franchitti is holding station in second position. It's still Kurt Thiem in the number 6 yellow Mercedes-Benz in third, then Jörg van Ommen ahead of Giancarlo Fisichella's Alfa Romeo. Then the battle's still on for 6th, 7th, 8th and 9th between Stefano Modena, Uwe Alsen, Klaus Ludwig and Sandy Grau, with Manuel Reuter in the second of the Calibras in 10th. But the man out in front, heading for the second international touring car victory of the season. The opening round at Mugello saw Bernd Schneider take victory, then run out of tyres in the second race and allow his teammate Dario Franchitti through to make it a Scot, winning for the first time in Class 1 touring cars. But this time it's going to be the German's turn. The man from Saarbrücken now lives in Monte Carlo. Bernd Schneider heads into the S's for the final time. A perfectly judged race, Derek.
Absolutely wonderful, yeah. I mean, he didn't have to worry about anybody behind him. Obviously now he has got Franchitti there, but he's probably backed off a little bit with his pace because he's near the end of the race, and he's driving a fine race. He's very, very well equipped to drive excellent races, top driver.
So Bernd Schneider completes the 25th and final run out of the hairpin into Goddard's. The checkered flag is being readied on the podium, heading out. You see the man on the right. There goes the flag. It's waved. Bernd Schneider takes victory at Donington Park. The Mercedes team, Norbert Haug there, the head of motorsport for Mercedes, huge smile on his face. 1, 2, 3, 4 for the Mercedes-Benz, and a superb result for Dario Franchitti, waving to his fans as he heads through Redgate on the slowing down lap. And the battle's still on. Look at the battle between Sandy Grau and Manuel Reuter. Sandy Grau makes it to the line by a car's length for the 9th position. But the Mercedes team, in appropriate headgear, are celebrating success for Bernd Schneider, Dario Franchitti, Kurt Thiem and Jörg van Ommen. As lining up behind the pace car comes the winner of race number 1 from Donington Park, Bernd Schneider. So, Bernd Schneider celebrating success in very hot and difficult conditions. A dramatic race which saw Yannick Dalmas roll out of contention in his Calibra. The good news is he is okay. And Bernd Schneider is leading Dario Franchitti into the podium area. So, Bernd Schneider waving to his fans as we go for a break.